can't hear you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's much better. Before I start to say anything, I would like to welcome you to the first event that we are having in this Discover Islam Week. The event is a talk that will be given by Brother Imran Hussein, and the topic is why should we follow a religion? The format of the talk is going to be about an hour. It might not be up to an hour, but we'll be targeting anything between 45 minutes to 1 hour. And after that, we're going to be having a 10 to 15 minutes break that we'll be able to have some drinks and eat a bit of food. So after that, we'll come back for another 45 minutes where we're going to have a Q&A session. The Q&A session is going to be through text message. So this number that you're seeing on the screen is the number that you can send your questions. When you send the questions, I will inshallah read it to the Sheikh and you'll be able to answer your questions. But if we are able to finish all the questions that are sent through the text messages, inshallah, and we still have time, then we'll open the floor for those that would prefer to ask a question directly rather than through text message. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the speaker, Mr. Imran Hussein. And for those of you that don't know Mr. Imran Hussein, he is an engineer by training with a degree in industrial design and engineering at the University of Nottingham. He is also a public speaker and instructor with the IERA community. For those of you that don't know IERA, it means Islamic Education and Research Academy. It's based in London, and it's an organization that is committed to educating and informing humanity about the truth and noble message of Islam. He also specializes on topics such as the existence of God, the purpose of life, reasons to believe, why Islam, the importance of dawah, and it's got really relevant in the 21st century, to name a few. So basically today he'll be talking to us about why should we follow a religion, which inshallah he'll be able to highlight some key points and answer some questions. He's also a regular speaker at the Speaker's Corner, for those of you that are familiar with it, and he's engaged in several debates and discussions about Islam. He has also helped to set up local da'wah teams across the West London area. For those of you that are from London, maybe you are familiar with this. And this is among some of the works that he has been doing. So let me not hold you too long. Inshallah, I'll pass you on to Mr. Imran Hussein, and he will begin the talk, inshallah. Thank you.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's not as loud, maybe once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, good. I know this evening, I know you guys have probably been to lectures, some of you probably come from work, and you're here now, maybe tired, maybe close to your bedtime. Nevertheless, inshallah, I want to really try focusing and engaging, even if it's for the next 30, 40 minutes. I try my best to keep it as short as possible, and then we'll have an extensive Q&A. But in those 30, 40 minutes, I want us to really think about some of the realities I'm going to discuss today, right? And right off the bat, I want to make something really clear. I'm not a sheikh, as the brother mentioned. I'm not even a student of knowledge. You wouldn't even consider me that. I'm just a regular individual who likes to think about reality, think about life, think about our purpose, our meaning, religions, God's existence, why we are here, what we're here for, where we're going, and just about things like this, right? Things that most of us think about, things that many of us think about in many cases. Questions such as about our purpose and our meaning arise in all of our minds, right? At some point in our lives. At some point in our lives, we all think about these realities. We all think about religion, about God, about meaning and purpose. We all get to the point in our lives where we take a back foot, we stop for a second, and we think, is all of this clubbing, this partying, this drinking, these recreational drugs, smoking, are these things cutting the mustard, as they say? Are they there again. You know, back to the same old grind. I'm aware again. You know, if you're like conscious in certain respects again, I'm aware of reality again. I can't hide away anymore. When we do these things for long enough, we all get to this point. Is this it? Is this what it's all about? Enjoying life, fulfilling our desires, you know, spending time with family, eating, drinking, using the washroom, the toilet, and then going to work or school and coming back and repeating the cycle over and over and over again. Is this what it's all about? So the question of God, the question of religion, or as it's titled, I think the talk, you know, why do we follow religion anyway, is an interesting one. And what I want to do first is I want to change the question slightly, because from my perspective at least, it's not, you know, why should we follow religion? Why don't we follow religion? I believe. Why don't we believe in God? What reasons do we have not to? And this is something we want to discuss and think about today, and get us all to think about and engage with today, right? So it's going to be really formal, relaxed. Just I'm going to throw out some concepts and some ideas, and I want you guys to think about these things. And maybe during the Q&A, if you have any questions related to the topic, we can discuss them further. So the first thing I want to do is talk about meaning. What does life mean? Let's think about this from the perspective of if you deny God's existence. If we say God doesn't exist, there is no religion, there's no such thing, what does life mean? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to live a good life? Right? Or our notion or concept of good. What does it mean to give charity, for example? Or to help the old lady cross the road? Or to do humanitarian work? Or to do charity work? What does it mean? What do all of these things mean? What difference does it make? Let me put it this way. What difference does it make if you live your life as a saint, let's say, right? Doing all the good you can. All the good you can think of in the world. Or living as a sinner. Living as an individual who does all the bad you can think of. If our ends are the same, think about this for a second. If our ends are the same, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years from today, we will all be dead. Every single person sitting in this auditorium right now will be dead. We will all be dead. Maybe 100 years from now, if we're lucky. But we will be dead. If our ends are the same, if most of us, if not all of us, will be buried 6 foot under, being eaten by worms, maggots, and whatever other insects and creatures they may be, then what difference does it make if we live as a saint or a sinner? Think about this. Really think about this for a second. If all we are, according to naturalism, I'll use naturalism as an example because it's more crude from that perspective. If all we are is a rearrangement of molecules, just rearrangement of physical stuff, here by accident, without any meaning, without any purpose, we weren't intended. We weren't intended to be here. We have just emerged by chance, a random accident. If that's all we are, really think about this, then what difference does it make if we live a good life, or what we call good, something we will discuss, or we live a evil, bad life, if we're just going to die and fade away? Because on a cosmic scale, we're only here for a split second. Here, now, gone tomorrow. Finished. That's our reality as human beings. I mean, if you go out, and sometimes I do this, it's quite strange, you just go out onto the street at night, you look up into the sky, you see the stars, you see these amazing stars which cover the sky. Some of these stars have been there for hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years, right? The things in the universe have been there for time, for age. But look at us, we're so insignificant on a cosmic scale. We are so insignificant. We're here today, gone tomorrow. We're nothing. We're not even a glitch on a cosmic scale. Yet we give ourselves meaning. Right? We, as human beings, we give ourselves meaning. But what does it mean? If we really claim there is no God, then we cannot actually claim this actual meaning to life. We can't really claim such a thing. We can't claim that it actually means something to live a good life. Or it actually means something not to do evil, not to do bad, not to do things that are wrong. Right? And let's carry on that trail of thought for a second. Let's think about purpose. Something else which human beings for centuries have been, or since man first stepped on the earth, if you like, have been engaged with. The notion of purpose, right? Something we all run after. As soon as we become aware as human beings, whatever age that may be at, we start to think about purpose. We start to think about things we want to do, people we want to become, right? This is something we want to do. All of us are here in this educational institution today because we want to become someone, right? We have a goal in mind, a purpose in mind. Maybe unlike me, I went to university for no real reason, just that it was a continuation of my previous education. Nevertheless, many of us here, we come with an intention to become someone, a doctor, an engineer, a scientist, a mathematician, wherever else it may be, right? We all have purpose, we ascribe purpose to ourselves. I want us to think about this reality now. Is there actual purpose in the absence of God? Again, repeating, emphasize the point. If all we are is a rearrangement of physical stuff, atoms, and here by chance, if all we are is just an accident, then can we actually claim true ultimate purpose? Is there any ultimate purpose? The reality is no. Now some of you may argue, well, I have purpose. I have purpose. I want to be a doctor. I have purpose. I want to be an engineer. I want to do charity work. You know, I want to go out there and help the poor. You know, I want to rid the world of some of its evils in my lifetime. I want to spend my life doing something positive. Fine, good. But is that your actual purpose? Or is that purpose you're ascribing to yourself? Giving yourself? If you think about it, the reality is this is purpose we give ourselves. Anything you guys want to become right now, or be, is purpose you've given yourselves as you've grown up. It's almost like being thrown into reality, as an American writer once wrote. You're thrown into reality, right? Being born is like being thrown into reality. You don't choose your birth. The reality is none of us chose to be born. None of you chose to be male or female, as tall as you are, as short as you are, what your hair color is, your eye color is, what part of the earth you're born. You didn't choose any of these things, right? We're thrown into reality. And as we grow up, we see the world around us and we start conforming. We start to see patterns around us, we start conforming to this reality. And eventually we start giving ourselves purpose because we notice there's something empty, something missing. We're wired, we're designed to do this. We're designed to worship the Creator, something I'll touch upon. But when we don't find God, when we don't find Allah, then that void that's within us, we look to fill that with something else. We look to find other purpose, something to keep us going, something to keep us distracted, if you like. But the reality is there's no ultimate purpose in the absence of God. It's this ascribed purpose, or in more crude terms, we're deluding ourselves. We're actually lying to ourselves. This is the reality. If we deny God, we're lying to ourselves when it comes to purpose. There is no ultimate purpose. Let's think about happiness. Another profound thing, something as human beings we all chase after. Ask the why question, right? As children do. You know, I want to be a doctor. Why? I want to help people. Why? It makes me feel good. Why? Because it makes me happy. Right? It all comes down to happiness. We all want to be happy as human beings. All of us. We strive after happiness. We run after happiness. When we want to buy cars or the next big house or the new fridge freezer or the new laptop or the iPad or the iPod, whatever it is, it's because these things give us, at least in this respect, temporary gratification, temporary satisfaction, right? But we want to be happy as human beings. But again, in the absence of God, can we truly be happy? Let me give you guys an analogy. Imagine for a second that after this lecture or talk or whatever it is, you guys go away and you're sitting outside in the corridor and suddenly you guys fall asleep, right? And the next thing you know, you wake up and you're on a plane. You don't know how you got on the plane, but you're on a plane, and the plane's moving. For a moment, think about the reaction you're going to have. Think about what you're thinking, what you're feeling right now inside. You've just gone to sleep in Nottingham University, and you've woken up in a plane. Think about this first. How are you going to feel? Imagine this is really happening right now. Imagine you really went to sleep and you woke up on a plane. How are you feeling? How do you feel? Think about this. Right? But at the same time, suddenly you start to notice the comfort of the chair you're sitting in. Suddenly you start to notice the nice air, or the nice smell, which is circulating within the cabin. Suddenly you look out the window and you see the most beautiful sight. You see these amazing mountains, and the sun setting, and this is the most beautiful sight you've ever seen. Suddenly you notice that there's this 5-star meal right in front of you. This amazing meal, the most amazing meal you've ever seen. Right? So temporarily you're being distracted. You're seeing these things. How do you feel now? How do you feel? Think about this for a second. How do you feel right now? You may feel temporary satisfaction, gratification. Temporarily, you may be distracted. But the question I want you to ask yourselves is, can you truly be happy? Not knowing how you go on the plane, where the plane's going, and when you're going to get off, if you're ever going to get off. Can you truly be happy in this scenario? Think about this. I want an answer. Would you truly be happy in this scenario? If suddenly you fell asleep, and you woke up on a plane, and you don't know where the plane's going, how you got on the plane, or when it's going to stop, would you truly be happy?
Yes.
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 You're a very exciting individual. I must say.
If you believe that Allah will take care of you, yes.
Okay. If you believe Allah will take care of you, so that's a good answer. But if you don't, right? The reality is, if you just suddenly woken up on a plane, the reality, bro, is if you were to sleep in your bed tonight, right, and you woke up in a, I don't know, in a meat freezer somewhere on the other side of the world, you'll freak out as well, right? That's the reality. As human beings, we like to know where we're going, right, or what's going on. But if you were in that scenario, we won't truly be happy. We may be distracted, right, temporarily, but we won't truly be happy unless we know the answer to these questions. And this is the reality of life. This is the reality of life. We've been thrown into existence, we're born, we don't know who we are, where we've come from, where we're going, and we're temporarily distracting ourselves, trying to keep ourselves happy, searching for happiness. And again, emphasizing the point that it's almost as if we're created or designed with this inbuilt system, this inbuilt notion, this inbuilt process, if you like, or structure, whatever you want to call it, which seeks or searches for happiness, searches for purpose, searches for meaning. Right? And what I'm saying is that in the absence of God, you can't claim any of these things in its true sense. You can't truly be happy, you can't truly claim any true ultimate purpose, and there is no ultimate meaning. There's nothing. Nothing except distractions and delusions. We're distracting ourselves if we deny God. Right? And this is why I would argue it's necessary. But let's put religion aside for a second. I would say argue it's necessary to firstly acknowledge God's existence. Because in the absence of God, we can't claim any of these things. Any of these things we search for, we need as human beings. We truly need. We don't truly need the next iPad or the iPhone. What we truly need is this internal satisfaction. This internal happiness. This true knowing of what our purpose is. And Islam in particular gives us exactly these things. In Islam, what's profound is something that's mentioned and emphasized is our purpose. God tells us our purpose very clearly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran highlights for us clearly that He has created us to worship Him. Right? Now I know some of us, in the context we live in today, may have an issue with the word worship, and I'll define that for you slightly. But the point is, God has created us to worship Him. It's that simple. Now worship from the Islamic perspective isn't just praying 5 times a day, devoting your life completely in that way. Worship is comprehensive in Islam. Worship can begin from when you wake up in the morning, to when you brush your teeth, to when you have your breakfast, and you drop your kids up to school, you go to work, you do your work, you come home, you smile at your wife when you come home, you play with your children, you go back to bed. Worship encompasses all of these things. Right? Worship encompasses all of these things from the Islamic perspective. Allah has created us to worship Him. This is what we've been created for. This is our purpose. Our purpose is to worship God. God also tells us in the Quran that He has created us to test which of us is best in deeds. Which of us does good. Really strives to do good. And this is another thing I want to discuss briefly. What is good in the absence of God? Think about this concept. Because all of us as human beings, Muslims, Christians, theists, atheists alike, all of us, we want to be good as human beings. We want to do good. Right? Again, it's wired within us to do good and be good. But what is good? What is good in the absence of God? Nothing. We can't really know what good really is, truly is. This is the thing, because we claim to know what good is and want to do good. But what is good? How do we define good? What is our criteria for good? Right? Think about this. I'll give you a crude example. Is it objectively actually wrong to kill an innocent child for no reason? For no reason at all. To kill an innocent child. Is it wrong? Is it wrong?
Yes.
I want everyone to answer. Yes? Okay. Now, the reality is it's absolutely absolutely wrong to kill an innocent child. Let me ask you another question. Why?
I would.
Sorry?
Why it's wrong?
Why is it wrong to kill an innocent child for no reason at all? You believe that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, now why? I'm just checking. Because I got a crazy response from you in the beginning, so So why is it wrong?
Because I don't have the right to make something.
I was asking you. Anyway,
Same answer.
What was the answer?
I don't have the right to.
Okay, you don't have the right to find.
To
But, yes, okay, but why is it actually wrong? I'm not saying if you've got the right to or not. Why is it wrong? You feel it's wrong. Yes? Why is it actually wrong? Is it actually wrong, or is it just because we feel it's wrong?
I think in my perspective, sorry. Because you're inflicting suffering on the child and you're ending their conscious experience.
So are you saying that criteria to judge right or wrong is based on the outcome of a particular action?
Yes.
Okay, so consequentialism in another terms. But the reality is consequentialism fails in many aspects as well. Because one, do you know the consequences of all particular actions?
That doesn't mean to say that it limits the efficacy.
Sure. But the problem is, do you know the true consequence? You can assume or you think what the consequence may be, but do you know what it's going to be?
We always make judgments in the presence of each other. So
Okay.
if we're uncertain about what the consequences are, we can make what is probabilistic for the best judgment.
Okay, so it's not foolproof. It can fail. Right? Another thing is, why is the criterion human flourishing? Why is flourishing the criteria for you? Why have you determined that as a criterion?
What else could be a
No, but nevertheless, because you determined that as a criterion, right? Why is that the criterion? Okay, so how are you linking being human, to caring about people's flourishing? Okay, fair enough, but why then does that mean that is your criteria? But my point is that you're saying that if a particular action results in the flourishing of a particular child, for example, in the case of the child, you're saying that if it flourishes due to a particular action of mine, then it's good to do, let's do it, right? But if it doesn't, then we shouldn't, right? Now, first problem was we don't know the consequences of all particular actions. Secondly, the second problem is that why is that your criteria? Why have you made that your criteria? Can you see the problem? Can you see the problem? Can you see the problem?
It's not a problem. Meaning is not something that's external to the system, it's inherent in the system.
Okay.
DNA without the enzymes is transcribable.
Sure.
It is meaningless.
Yes.
A disk data on it without a computer to interpret it is meaningless.
Sure.
So could we find a way?
Okay, we'll discuss this in the Q&A. We'll move on from this point. We'll discuss this further. Anyway, the point being, because
What you said, so we couldn't hear anything.
okay, the gentleman was saying basically the consequences of an action is the gauge which we use to determine whether we should do something or is good to do or bad, right? Now, if it results in flourishing, if it results in good, then do it. If it results in bad, then don't do it, right? That was the point that was being made. But my point was, we don't really know the consequences of all particular actions. We can assume the consequences, but we don't really know. Another problem is, which we didn't highlight, is that sometimes under consequentialism there can be a certain action which can be fine according to consequentialism, be disgusting in other terms as well. There's some really crazy, I'm sure you can think of many examples, right? There are many crazy examples we can use.
Most of them are bad instructions.
They're crude examples, but they still apply. They apply. If you think about reality in a crude sense, they apply. Right? You can't deny it. And this is a problem from a consequentialist perspective. Right? So it's not foolproof. And the reality, going back to the point, which is, I forgot my point. The point I'm making, which is you can't.
Why you spat the kids on?
Yes. The point being that in the absence of God, you can't really claim any objective right or wrong, objective moral morality. There's no objective moral values in humans. This is what we say. Because in the absence of God, you don't have an anchor. In the absence of God, you can't peg right and wrong into anything beyond our human subjectivity. All we have in the absence of God is our human subjective minds, our limited minds, our subjective ideas and opinions, all the subjective ideas and opinions of the collective or the group. Right? Or you have evolution, but that runs into their own problem, because still, if you peg morality on evolution, you say that our moral values and duties have evolved just like our hands, feet, and teeth have, then they will continue to evolve like everything else. It doesn't make them objective in any sense. It's still relative to that particular thing. So the point being is that if you want to claim it's objectively actually wrong to kill an innocent child, you have to claim God exists, because in the absence of God, you can't claim objective anything. It's only our subjective opinion. It's only our subjective ideas and opinions of a collective whole, of a group. And this is another problem, right? Because as human beings, we want to do right, we want to do good. But when it comes to pegging good, or claiming what's actually good, we have no anchor. Let's take another cool example. Imagine, if you like, you're going down an alley at night and you see a man who's about to kill an innocent child, right? And you're there and the man's there. Okay? Now, you may say to him, it's wrong, don't kill the child. Now he'll say, no, it's right, I'm going to kill the child. On what basis do you argue with that individual? Do you see?
In the absence of God.
In the absence of God. You have no anchor to argue by.
I think I disagree with you, because we might have a moral system that we could have benefits by that prohibit such action.
Sorry, which?
You could have a moral system within
What system? Give me a system.
social system, modern.
Okay, but that's okay. So you're saying social system, you're saying a group of people come together and determine what's right and wrong, right?
In the absence of God.
In the absence of God. Okay, good. Now if we do that, say in the UK, I'll give you another example. Say in the UK, we have a group of, say, for example, 50 people. Okay? 50 people come together and decide it's right to slap your neighbor on a Thursday. Okay? Just for the sake of example. Okay? But at the same time, say somewhere in India, you have another group of 50 people who come together and say it's wrong to do it on a Thursday, to do it on a Saturday. Who's right? Who's wrong?
Well, based on the moral system in UK, slap someone on Thursday.
But that's a problem. Say it's acceptable here, but it may not be acceptable somewhere else in the world. You see?
Yeah, but it's.
But there is subjective ideas of different communities. It's still subjective.
I don't think that's necessarily a good analogy. It's what push people together and say what it is that would benefit them.
Yes.
Okay? What is the benefit them is something you can measure as a property of that group. It's not something they arbitrarily decide among themselves. It's about measurable properties of those individuals. So take a group of people together and say, why do we this particular thing it will make them and that's not something that's arbitrarily.
That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is, say there's two groups of 50 people each, right? Just to remove the idea of majority wins, right? So say there's two groups of 50 people each. One says it's right to do this on a Thursday, another says it's right to do it on a Friday. What's the deciphering factor between the two? How do we judge who's right and wrong?
Well, neither group is using
Either group's right, right?
So neither group's using a valid
Sure.
approach.
So it's one subjective opinion used versus the other subjective.
But what I'm saying is that you could resolve that situation by taking the 100 people together and saying what's best for those 100 people.
How do you know what's actually best?
No, by measuring, by saying what outcomes, what if it's slapping people on a Friday or slapping people on a Thursday. Maybe if we measure it and it works out that not slapping people on any day of the week is in fact actually makes everyone happier.
So, but the next question is who determines that? And you're saying a group of 100 people come together with that conclusion, right? Say if they come to the conclusion that it's right to do it both ways, what would you do then?
But
would that become right?
It is an invalid conclusion because it's not actually making everyone happier. They've come to the agreement that they should do it, but if you actually measure their
But
happiness...
say it does make the majority happy and the minority not happy. Would it make it right? Because according to consequentialism, it should make it right. That's
So you're saying if slapping people on a Thursday happens to make everyone happy?
I'm saying slapping people on a Thursday and a Saturday makes the majority happy. According to consequentialism, then it's good. Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. Do you see the issue? But is it? But I'm asking you the question.
But why is that a problem?
What's your name?
Richard.
Richard. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
you. Okay. Now you accept that it's according to consequentialism is right. But would you, as an individual now, claim that's actually right, or is it wrong to do that?
Well, I would claim it's right if I actually sort of felt happier as a result of being slapped on the Thursday and the Friday.
Okay, but
I doubt that I would.
exactly, and I doubt most people would. Right?
Yeah.
We all agree that it's wrong,
Yeah.
right? But what I'm highlighting is the problem. If it makes the majority happy, according to consequentialism, it's fine. Right?
Yeah.
But then it goes against what human nature dictates.
But
we know it's wrong.
my point is, the groups would not come to that conclusion if they were actually.
How do you know that? You're speaking from your perspective, man. Your subjective experience.
It's not a subjective thing. I'm saying that if objectively, when you measure it, the group is not happier when they're slapped on the Thursday or the Saturday.
Yeah. Then what happens?
Then the consensus of the group to slap everyone on Thursday and Saturday is incorrect because it's not actually made.
Yeah, according to the question, yes. But you're saying if, you have the word if there. Now let's say if they do agree it's okay on both days, and it makes the majority happy, then according to consequentialism.
Then yeah, it's fine, but why would it make it's just that it wouldn't make the majority happy.
Which is, we can argue from our subjective perspective that the house comes. Yeah. But the point is there's a problem. It fails.
But if it did actually make the majority happy, then yeah, it would be fine. I don't see why it's a problem.
Sure. Okay, so you say it's fine. Okay, so let me ask you another question. Imagine tomorrow, again, crude example, right? Just for the sake of this discussion. Right?
Yeah.
Imagine the majority of the people on earth agree that it's okay to, let's not make it, it's okay to kill your neighbor's cat once a month, okay? So it's okay to kill your neighbor's cat once a month, yeah? And the majority of the world comes to that conclusion, would that be right?
I don't want to sort of seem to be dodging the question, but I think I want to continue with the talk and have this in the Q&A.
But just on that point, really think about that particular point.
Yeah.
We can discuss this further. Okay, back to the main point. You know, I think this is really helpful because it gets across the more points that I'm able to. So the initial points I'm making, just to reiterate, just to bring us back to scratch, is number one, you can't claim any true meaning, no true purpose, no ultimate happiness, right? We can't claim any objective moral truths, any objective right or wrong. It's all subjective and relative in the absence of God. Another thing I want to touch upon is justice, right? And this is something found from the Islamic perspective. This is something I really wanted to touch upon because the reality is, as human beings, we need direction. Right? We look for direction, whether it be atheists or theists alike. We get into communities, we have our groups, and we have our ideas of what's good and bad. Take a community in the Amazonian rainforest, right? For example, if you take a group of people in the Amazonian rainforest, they may not have a spoken language, but one thing they will do is they will put laws and processes into place in the communities. Right? And you'll notice this. They have distinctive laws that they follow as a group, as a society. As human beings, we crave laws, if you like, direction, guidance. Right? This is something we crave as human beings. And this is something God provides again. Religion provides. Islam in particular provides. It gives us a compass. It gives us a direction. It gives us reason. Let's take justice, for example. Right? And I was in Pakistan 5 days ago. I've just come back recently. Right? And honestly, some things I saw there, and this is the Muslim world, right? A part of the Muslim world. I was shocked. And I developed a new sense of appreciation for even our non-Muslim brothers and sisters in humanity in the UK. Because there's some beautiful things in the UK that we don't appreciate as Muslims, honestly. Right? Sometimes we get carried away looking at all the negatives amongst all the other people, but there's some beautiful things that people have in the rest of other parts of the world, in the UK especially. Right? Let's take justice, for example. Courtesy, that's another thing. Right? Something we've lost. We've lost in Pakistan in places like that because we've turned away from our tradition. And I was saying to the brother earlier that there's many non-Muslims which are implementing the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ more so than we are as Muslims ourselves. And it's a shame. It's really a shame. We have to learn something from these people, honestly. Because sometimes we get carried away in talking about giving dawah, conveying the message of Islam, which is important. We need to do that. Because if we know something is good for us as human beings, we share. Right? And this is from that perspective we share. But at the same time, we need to realize there's good we can take from them. Right? And learn from them. They're following what the Prophet ﷺ said to us over 1400 years ago, more so than we are. Right? More so than we are in many cases. For example, I know in the media we have this one narrative which has been pushed more than anything else, which is, Islam, barbaric, backward, evil, killing people, this, that, and the other. Right? But the reality is when you start to study Islam, and even if you scratch the surface, what you notice is some beautiful things, amazing things. Take the concept of justice, right? In the Quran, Allah tells us, be just even if it's against yourselves. Go against yourself. Bear witness against yourselves. If you've done something wrong, come out with it. If it's your family, your friends, or anything like that, it doesn't matter. Be just. That's more correct. Something that Islam came with over 1400 years ago. Something many of us have let go of and we don't implement in our lives, or in our societies, or in our communities. Right? Something we should really think about. Let's take, for example, the conditions of war. Right? The reality is, as human beings, as any race, any culture, any civilization, this is something we have in our systems. Right? There's criteria, there's certain rules and regulations when it comes to war. Look at some of the teachings in Islam when it comes to war. The Prophet ﷺ said that he said, don't cut off trees, don't cut off livestock, don't kill the elderly, children, women, innocent civilians. Right? How many civilizations, how many communities, how many systems in the world today take these things and consider these things and implement these things? Really think about that, because we always seem to focus on the negative when it comes to Islam, right? Because of this narrative that's been created. But how many of us actually focus on Islam as a holistic system? Actually look at it holistically. Look at something positive for once as well. Right? Something that's actually true. And this is something Islam gives you. Right? It gives us a compass, it gives us direction, it gives us rules. Right? And many people in the West, we all have this notion, even me before I became practicing, I had this idea, notion, I don't want rules. I want to be free. I don't want to, pray 5 times a day, smack my head on the ground and go to the mosque and do all of this, that, and the other. But the reality is, none of us are free. No one's actually truly free because we all conform. We're all slaves to something. We're all servants of something or someone. Right? Some of us to the system, some of us to money, to houses, to cars, to women, to alcohol, to drugs. And in some cases, some of us, as in the Quran, we're told to our own desires, we take that as Lord. We take our own desires as a creator of God. And this is something I noticed. I'm not saying across the board, but something I've noticed is that many people who deny God, it's not because they have good rational reasons to deny God. It's because they don't want to give up what they desire. They don't want to give up alcohol in some cases. They don't want to give up drugs in some cases. They don't want to give up their girlfriends or boyfriends or their 101 other things they may be doing to entertain themselves, to make themselves feel better. Right? We're slaves. We're all slaves. And what Islam is giving us is something beautiful, something profound. Because what Islam is telling us, choose your slavery. No one's really free. What Islam is saying, choose your slavery. Are you going to be a slave to the system? Are you going to be a slave to things that are created? Or are you going to be a slave to the Creator, the one who made the system, the one who made everything, the one who put everything into place? This is something profound. This is something that truly liberates you. Because if you truly want to be free in the true sense, I believe, if you truly want to be free, you're only going to achieve that freedom through submitting yourself to the Creator and not submitting yourself to created things. This is the perspective of Islam. It's very clear. And to the rational person, the rational individual, I personally would take the route, enslave yourself to the Creator. Because when you enslave yourself to the Creator, you're not a slave to these ephemeral things anymore. No longer is money the most important thing to you, or houses or cars, or these materialistic things which don't serve any real purpose, don't really satisfy you, fulfill you. You're a slave to the Creator. If you get physical things, if you get material things, alhamdulillah, you're grateful. If you don't, alhamdulillah, fine. Because we realize life is a test, we're here to be tested. And we realize we're here to worship the Creator. Very simple, 2 concepts. Life is a test, and we're here to worship the Creator. When we understand and implement these concepts, and we realize the Creator, there is no power except God. There is no power or might except God. Everything that happens is by the leave of the Creator, and as He determines. Once we realize these concepts, we truly find freedom. In the sense we can. Right? In the real sense we can. We can truly be free. Because we're no longer a slave to Maxim, to Vogue, for the sisters, the fashion magazines, or the makeup magazines, wherever else. For the brothers, we're no longer slaves to wanting to buy cars or the next big house, or wanting to buy the next big villa in Spain or wherever else it may be. Right? Because we're all running after these things. And we're enslaved to these systems because this idea of freedom that I'm free, I don't want to worship a creature. It's a false idea, it's a false notion which has been pushed in some respects in the society we live in today. It's been pushed. Go 9 to 5, do your work, come home, have your dinner, repeat every single day. By Friday, by the end of the week, as soon as you start to feel like you're going to go mad, you know, is my life all this, is this all there is? As soon as you start to feel like this, take 2 days off. Don't get pissed, get drunk, forget yourselves, and wake up Sunday morning, Monday morning, go back and repeat the cycle. Right? Go back and press a few buttons and do the cycle again. This is not what life's all about. This is the system we've implemented ourselves into, which is fine. Right? We need to live on this earth, we need to function within society. And as Muslims, we're encouraged to do this. We're encouraged to function within society. We're encouraged to do good. It's something, again, we don't do as Muslims. Right? Something, again, we don't get involved in is community work. Do something positive for people. Right? All we do, and I can say this from personal experience as well, is that we go home, we put on CNN or BBC, we see something crazy on the TV, we start huffing and puffing, get into a mood, and we go out into public and we've got these frowns on our faces and we look at everyone in such an angry way, and the people on the streets, they watch the same news and they look at us and think, you know what, the news was right. He looks scary. He looks like he's about to do something. Yeah? We need to change this. Most of the narratives people believe is, we can blame the media all we like, but we've got to do work as well. We've really got to do a lot of work to implement what Islam actually teaches and do something for the community and show something, right? Because we're involved in da'wah, many of us here are involved in da'wah as well, but it's not all about wording, speaking and saying, right? That is da'wah, we're communicating, conveying the message, but at the same time back it up with something solid, something substantial. Do something for society. And I guess I'll wrap up on this particular point. I thank you guys for listening. We'll open up the Q&A now, inshallah. And hopefully this has benefited you, got you guys to think about certain things, think about certain realities. And hopefully we'll have a productive Q&A, inshallah. Jazakallah for listening. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi.
Jazakallah khair. We'll be having a break right now. So since we have time, so we'll be having a 15 minutes break. And I will be back at about 7:45. And we'll continue the Q&A session. You're welcome back. And inshallah, we'll continue where we stopped, as promised. It's going to be the Q&A session. And some of you have sent some questions, but they're not much, so I encourage all of you to start sending questions, inshallah, so that they will be answered. If we are able to answer all the questions sent via the text message, we'll open the floor for people to ask questions directly. But what would happen is, if you have a question, you raise your hand, and a mic would come to you, you ask, and you give Sheikh or Mr. Imran Hussein, you give him a chance to answer. And please try not to be too argumentative, and try and give other people a chance to ask questions also. If your question is addressed, it doesn't have to necessarily be answered the way you want it to be answered, so just try to be as polite as possible, please. So we'll start, the first question I got, I don't think it's very relevant here. Somebody wants an opinion on masturbation, so I don't think it's actually applies. So I would skip that, I'm sorry, because it doesn't actually fit into what we're discussing today. But maybe in subsequent days, we can bring up the same question.
Ask Hamza tomorrow,
Yeah, so, and the next question I received, the person is asking, what are the implications of a godless society in the context of secular Britain, where society has material happiness as a purpose? Why I bring the question is, he put a question mark after godless society, but I think it's supposed to be in the end. He wants, the person wants to know the implication of godless society in relation to secular Britain.
Okay, good question. Let's break it into two parts. Firstly, I want to clarify just a small point. When we speak about there being no objective moral truths in the absence of God, we're not saying atheists can't be good people, right? So I want to make this very clear. That's not the point. The point we're making is you can't objectify morals in any sense, right? There are many atheists who are good people. So when it comes related to the question, when it comes to what are the implications of a godless society, Initial point being, it doesn't mean that people can't be good, or people don't know what good is, or some aspects of good, because we know it's part of the fitrah. It's innate to know certain rights and wrongs. Right? Now, from that perspective, you can apply the idea of consequentialism and think, okay, I can determine what may be good. In some respects, we may know. In some respects, we won't know. But the point from the Islamic perspective is, as human beings, we don't know all good and bad, right and wrong. Right? We can try to come to that, but it doesn't mean we know all good and bad. Right? But from the fitrah perspective, from this innate perspective, from the perspective of our innate disposition, we can know or come to certain rights and wrongs. Right? As we know, when I asked you guys earlier, is killing an innocent child for no apparent reason or reason at all wrong? Everyone would say it's wrong. Right? Although you may not, in the absence of God, be able to justify it objectively, but we still know it's wrong. Okay? This is from the fitrah. This is from the innate perspective. Okay? Now, from that perspective, we can, as a society or civilization, implement some good things. As I mentioned before, there's many things in British society, right, which are amazing, which are beautiful. For example, justice, right, equality, being selfless, caring, right, being courteous. Right? Some of these things are beautiful that we find in society. Some beautiful, amazing things that we find implemented in British society and British values, which were taught to us by Prophet ﷺ over 1400 years ago, which we, as I mentioned before, don't implement ourselves as Muslims. Or we should be doing more so. But at the same time, if we deny God, it leaves the door open. This is the problem. It leaves the door open for many things which can be abhorrent, can be crazy in many respects. Right? And we can name a list of things which can be justified in the absence of God. Under consequentialism, under other ideologies or ideas or moral theory, whatever it may be. Right? And this is the problem. So I'm not saying society will crumble completely in the absence of God if you deny God. But if you deny God, it leaves the door open for many evils, for many ills in society. Right? And we see some of the effects already. You know, even in society today, even in the UK, we see so many effects. Right? As I mentioned before, in Pakistan, I was there for a while. Yes, it's a Muslim country. Yes, there's Muslims there, but we're not practicing our own tradition. And when we don't do this, we see the evils creep into society. We see corruption. There's something huge in Pakistan. Right? We see people not being fair, right? People stealing. Right? And the list of examples go on. But there's ills and wrongs in every society. And another point I make is, just because we're Muslim or we're trying to practice or implement Islam in our lives, it doesn't mean we'll become perfect. Right? We continuously try. It's being consistent with which matters, not being perfect. So this is what I wanted to stress. The second part of the question was after full stop.
The context of secular beauty, where society has material happiness as a problem.
That's another problem. Materialism, I believe, is a huge problem, right? Because now this is not to say as human beings we can't have nice things, we can't buy nice things, we shouldn't, right? It's encouraged. If you got the money, spend it. Obviously, be careful as to how you spend it. You know, giving charities, always do good with it. Also spend it on yourself as well. But materialism, or let's push the idea a bit more. Or the idea or the notion where people think they'll find satisfaction in buying things or having material things, this is a problem. Because we see this time and time again. Think about this. We live in one of the richest countries in the world, right? One of the most developed countries in the world, right? The West in general it's far more developed than the rest of the world. But at the same time, in these countries, we see the rates of suicide climbing, we see the rates of depression climbing, we see the rates of consumption of drugs like Prozac on the rise, all of these things. And the question to ask is why, when we have all of these amenities, when we have all of these luxuries, when we have all of these material things, which we can think of one, right? Even the poorest amongst us in here have much more than many other people on the face of this planet. Why is it when we have all of these things that we're depressed? Are we committing suicide? And the rate of suicide amongst teenagers is increasing as well. There was a case, I think last year, where a girl hung herself in a park, and on her arm or her hand she wrote, "I have no purpose. What is my purpose?" Something along those lines. And this was a teenage girl, and this was not an isolated case. This happens all the time. And the question to us is why? And I truly believe one of the reasons is because we're trying to fill that emptiness in other things other than God. Because we've been created with the fitra, with this innate need, this desire to worship. And again, we see this amongst atheist communities as well. You know, take communist China and Russia. They will make statues. Take Stalin, for example, statues of Stalin, which were exemplified. They were almost worshipped. People would look up to them, right? And we see this amongst atheist communities as well, this need to worship, right? And again, emphasizing the point, our nature is to worship the Creator. When we don't do that, we won't stop. We'll try to fill that void with something else. And in the society we live in today, it more than often tends to be materialism, material goods, shopping, right? Buying the new thing, buying the big house, buying the car, buying these things. But these things are not going to satisfy us. They're not going to make us happy, right? We're going to be left empty, right? And we go back. And we see the cycles. Look at rich people, right? They've got all the money in the world. They buy the yacht, the big boat, right? A few weeks later, it's just another boat. They buy the Ferrari, it's just another car. When you sit inside, you can't tell the difference, right? It's the same thing. And this is the problem. And eventually, these people get to the point where they live vicariously through other people, right? They'll have that car parked in their driveway for months, and only when someone else comes and looks at it and appreciates it, then they become, you see the sparkle in the eye, and yeah, that's my car, that's my Ferrari, yeah? But if that doesn't happen, it's just another car for them. And this is the problem. We're not going to fulfill ourselves with these material things. If you want true satisfaction, true contentment, it's only going to happen when you submit yourself to the Creator and worship. And this is why Allah God says in the Quran, verily indeed hearts find rest in the remembrance of God. If you're not remembering God, then what's your state? Eternally. And this is something we need to ask ourselves as human beings. Nothing we need to share with people, amongst people, or amongst us here. It's something we need to all ask ourselves. So hopefully that addresses that question.
The next question is actually a 3-in-1 question. Yeah. It goes like, are certain morals inherent? That's the first question. So, if not, why can so many people agree to many things we could classify as morals? That's the question, second question.
So are certain morals inherent?
Yeah. If not,
yep.
so the person has already assumed. If so, can you not argue that religion is not required for good and bad?
Okay, good point. Number one, I believe personally, and I can check this out, is that there are certain morals, certain truths that we know innately from the perspective of our fitrah. Right? Let's do this. I can ask you a range of questions. We can determine what's right and wrong. Right? For example, the question of the child, and so on and so forth. So certain morals are inherently innate. Right? We know, we can decipher between right and wrong to an extent. The second part of the question was?
If not, why can so many people agree to many things we classify?
I won't say they're not, so I'm accepting the first thing. The third part was that if they are inherent,
can you not argue that religion is not required?
religion is required. But I would argue to claim that certain morals are inherent, as I showed from the moral perspective, we can't argue that in the absence of God either. So for us to even claim that certain morals are inherent and objective in some sense, you need to accept God's existence. Because in the absence of God, think about this, in the absence of God, what reasons do we have to believe that these morals are inherent? We can argue, well, they just are. But that's not really arguing anything. That's just putting up the gloves and saying, okay, it just is. But when we think as rational human beings, our nature, where we come from, let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning of the universe. The universe comes into existence, right? Molecules are colliding into each other, gases bumping into each other. Over hundreds of thousands, millions of years, planets form. For some reason, our Earth emerges in this particular place called the Goldilocks zone, and life develops, pops into existence, and then life develops on this planet. And then we get to the point where there's moral beings which emerge on this planet, right? And it's all at random. We weren't supposed to be here. All we are is just a rearrangement of molecules. So in a very simple sense, we're just a rearrangement of molecules, an accidental rearrangement of molecules. If we're just that, and there is no God, if everything is just physical, we have no reasons to believe that we have developed this innate sense of morals, or this ability to determine between right and wrong. That will still be subjective and relative, even if you argue that it developed via a process through our evolutionary history, whatever it may be. It's still subjective and relative. We are not objective in any sense. So that's another point. And I would argue that, again, to claim that, certain morals are inherent and innate and deny God at the same time, you can't argue both. You can't have your cake and eat. If you want to claim that morals are inherent and objective, then you have to accept God. Because if you deny God, you can't claim objective laws.
The next question, if I should say, now the questions are just coming, so maybe you can, yes,
I'll speak up.
yes, beautiful answer. In the absence of God, how can you trust your intellect and cognitive abilities if you are just a product of blind random processes?
Yeah, it's a good question. So something that we've been looking into recently is how can we trust our minds in the absence of God? It's another question, right? It's a big question. It's something that, see, science, we're involved in the sciences, right? And we have progressed and we've developed many things via the scientific method. But the reality is the scientific method requires two fundamental main things, which is a rational mind and an intelligible universe. Right? A rational, intelligible universe. Both, I would argue, can't really be accounted for on atheism and naturalism. Now we can argue that our minds are rational and we have to take this as basic because if they weren't, we would not be able to know, right? Our minds are rational. So we accept that our minds are rational, but then I'm asking the question, is that having a mind being rational, what worldview does it support? Does it support atheism or does it support theism? Now I would argue it supports theism very strongly, very, very strong. Because how can you argue our minds are rational if we're just a result of blind random physical processes? Think about this, if we're a result of non-rational, blind, random physical processes, and our minds have developed via these processes, then there's no reason to accept their validity. Right? And another amazing thing is that we have a rational, intelligible universe. A universe that we can understand. Right? You can't have, see, if you have a rational mind and you don't have a rational universe that you can understand, which is mathematically coherent and obeys the laws of physics, then there's nothing to understand. But if you have a rational universe which obeys these laws and is mathematically coherent, but we have non-rational minds, then there's no way we could understand the universe. There's no way we could do science. We need both. And the analogy I give is it's almost like a lock and a key. The key being the mind and the lock being the universe, and our minds have the ability to unlock the universe and some of its majesty. Right? Something very amazing. There's an article on the One Reason website, if you'd like to read further on this. And I cover this in more detail. There's something very, very interesting to look into. Right? If everything is a result of blind, random, non-rational physical processes, how do we end up with rational, ordered minds and a rationally intelligible universe? It's something that's very simple but very profound. So hopefully that addresses that.
The next question, can you discuss marriage in relation to our overall purpose in this life? Why we should marry and the benefits of marriage within the context of Islam?
I don't know, it's beyond my reading. Something you guys need to check. Maybe I'll come here tomorrow.
The next question is, can Islam and a secular society coexist? Because Islam is more than a religion, and in the current climate, it's under attack.
That's a very deep question. I don't think I'm at this point able to answer that question, but what I would say is that many of the things we see in modern society in the West today are exactly what we find in Islam. Right? As I mentioned before as well, many of the things that are implemented in the West today we find in Islam, right? Being taught in Islam. And I believe there's much there, much more still behind the veil of all of this confusion and facade and lies and this smoke screen that Islam has to offer the West. A lot more. If we look into history, not too long ago, Islamic Spain, it was the Quran itself which allowed for this society to emerge, which allowed for this convivencia amongst Christians, Jews, and other people of other faiths to come together and to study together, and to take the works of the Greeks and to translate them and to develop them further, which further moved on to Europe and people came in and they took this up. And it was this society which was the head of the Quran. It was a Muslim society, it's an Islamic society, which allowed for this. And again, that was one aspect of what Islam has to offer, as far as community and society is concerned. Again, things that we don't look at. Things that we've been so caught up in this storm of nonsense on the media that we don't think about this. Muslims as well as non-Muslims. Right? Something we all need to, as intelligent individuals, educated individuals, something we all have a duty to inquire about and study further. Inshallah. So I believe Islam has so much more to offer than this. So many amazing things, which the West is missing out on. So that's my perspective.
This question says, how does atheism deal with the hard problem of consciousness?
Another question for Hamza. He's studying this further, but I would briefly touch upon it. It doesn't really, right? We have the likes of Daniel Dennett, who dismisses consciousness completely, and he says it's not real, it's an illusion basically. But the hard problem of consciousness, as they've termed it, is the idea that our third person subjective experience that we have as human beings, that can't be measured or quantified empirically in any way, shape, or form, right? And what I mean by that is, imagine Slaudin sitting here, he just had some samosa, what was it? Some sort of samosa, yeah? How he felt eating that samosa would differ from how Richard felt eating the samosa. Richard can never be able to understand and comprehend how Slaudin felt internally, that subjective experience of eating the samosa, and vice versa, he can't do the same. It's this that's called hard problem questions, it's this that can't be quantified, this experience. A scientist can wire a human being up, you can wire Slaudin up right now, and I give him another samosa, and as Slaudin eats the samosa, they can see the changes in the brain pattern and the chemical and neural firing, wherever it may be. Right? They can correlate that, but what they can't do is tell you how he's feeling at this point, eating this. That experience is something that can't be quantified via the empirical method. And that's why they call it the hard problem of consciousness. And I believe there's never going to be an empirical answer, because science as a method is limited to what's physically observable. Right? That's one of the limitations of the scientific method. Right? And when we speak about the limitations of the method, we don't hate the method, we love the method, but we like to put it in the place that it deserves, meaning we like to point out its positives and its limitations, because I believe when you truly do that, I was discussing with brother again, when you truly understand the limitations of the method, you can truly implement it to its best use. Right? But again, that's for another talk topic. But the point being, that's the hard problem of consciousness, something that science, I believe, can't quantify. And Hamza has done extensive research on this, and he read a paper on this as well, and he shows why God is the best inference, best explanation. That's my question.
I don't know if this is a question or a suggestion. The person is saying, the problem with consequentialism, let the speaker and Richard, the shadow speaker, discuss the core value of human beings beyond cost-effective analysis.
I'm sure Richard and me will discuss this. I don't know if you want to do it now, but we can do it after. So choice. Okay. Just for the sake of the benefit of everyone, we were discussing earlier about consequentialism, right? And the 2 points I was trying to make fundamentally was, one, is that you can't know the possible consequences of all particular actions, right? Which we agree with.
Yes, well, I said that you could probabilistically know.
Probabilistically, but you can't. The point I make is very specific, the statement I'm making. I'm saying you can't know the possible consequences of all actions, right? It's possible. It's possible that you can know the consequences or determine the consequences of some actions,
yes,
but not all actions.
Right? Well, I'm not sure how that's relevant to
I tell you why it's relevant.
the question.
The point I'm making that point is because what I'm trying to show that it's not full. You see?
Yeah.
As a
okay, but in that case, then, if our morality is derived from, say, the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, right? If we're using the writings in the Quran and the Hadith as our basis, then presumably we can be flawed in our interpretation of those. Presumably there could be uncertainties in how we understand them.
Yes, but that's
so this is so the same problem is presented by both methods. There is inherent uncertainty in our flawed ability to predict outcome or to interpret the basis.
Don't mind me saying it's a red herring. We're not discussing that particular aspect. I'm not saying that.
This is a question of moral
No, we're not.
epistemology.
Because Richard, I'm not arguing that via Islamic texts we can know what's right. I'm not arguing that. I'm just specifically arguing on consequentialism that we don't know the particular consequences of all actions. Are we agreeing on that?
We're agreed on that, but I don't see how that's relevant, because I think that's
the
a
reason
flaw of all positions.
Because do you ascribe to consequentialism yourself?
I consider myself a consequentialist and a utilitarian.
Okay,
yeah.
fair enough. Okay. Now the point I'm trying to make is that's your criteria. Okay?
Yeah.
Now the point I'm making is that number one, it's limited. You can't know the consequences of your actions. Right? And we agree to that.
Yeah.
So that's something that shows a flaw in that particular way of thinking straight away.
Yeah.
Number two, what I'm saying is that the consequences of a particular action can be abhorrent in many cases. I'm sure you looked at many examples. For the sake of the sanity of everyone here, we won't mention any. But there's some crazy outcomes. Let me give you a simple, let's take a very simple example.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Say if majority of the world, right, they came to the conclusion or the decision that it was right to dig up corpses and to use the dead body of the corpses, mix it within paint and use it within the houses. Right? Now, there's no apparent consequences of that. Say if they agree to that, would that be okay according to you?
Well, there's a number of things. At face value, yeah, of course, it would seem like consequential. I'd be okay with that, right? But the thing is, as humans...
We'll move on to your points. We should move on to points, but are you okay with that mission?
The thing is, I don't think that characterization of the consequentialist outcome is full, because humans will react negatively, emotionally, to exhuming the graves of people and painting them on the walls. And there are potential ill health consequences. Primary diseases, for example, can be transferred in that fashion. Right?
But that's
so,
not my argument. That's a separate point. You bring another point into it. What I'm saying very clearly is that if majority of the world agreed that it's okay to do this and they took precautions to make sure no one caught disease from doing this process, would it be okay?
It would be okay if it didn't bother anyone. But I suspect it would bother.
Can you not see a problem? It's not about what you suspect right now.
No, this is the thing, that there's a distinction between consensus and what actually people feel as a result of doing something. You know, if we come to a conscious consensus that something's fine, that's different from whether or not it actually feels to
okay,
everyone.
let me ask you a clear question.
Yeah.
30 more seconds. 30 more seconds.
According to consequentialism, it's fine. But according to what people actually feel, it's not. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Which means that according to consequentialism, it's not fine because consequentialism considers how people feel.
Exactly, but the point is that if it's accepted, but what you're saying is that it will never happen that way, but the point is that it can. The point is that people...
I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying that a consensus that is not morally correct can't result in something being implemented, but I'm saying that we can judge it to be not morally correct on consequentialism because it has that negative emotional impact on us, and that's something we have to factor into our consequentialist calculus.
But the point is that if everyone is okay with it, and precautions were taken, then according to you, according to consequentialism, it's fine.
Yeah.
So that's a problem for me.
Time up.
Thank you. Let's carry on.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, because we have so many questions, we have to end up interesting debates. Can science disprove the existence of God?
Yeah, okay, if everyone didn't hear the question.
Can science disprove the existence of God?
Can science disprove the existence of God? Science can never directly prove or disprove the existence of God at all. Right? This is something I want to make very clear. And any atheist and theist alike, anyone who's studying the philosophy of science will agree to this notion because science has a scope. Right? It's the best method we have as far as it comes to the physical world. Right? Observing and studying the physical world. I think it's Bertrand Russell who said science is an attempt to discover by means of observation and reasoning upon it particular facts about the world, basically, right? So what science does, it uses our senses, empiricism, and it studies the world, it takes in data, and you apply reasoning upon the data, you come to a particular conclusion, right? So straight away we know it's limited to what's physically observable, right? And when it comes to the question of God, at least from the Islamic perspective, we're not arguing for a physical God, we're arguing for a metaphysical reality. The Creator who created the physical world and is distinct and distinct from the physical world. Right? Now this being cannot be directly proven or disproven by the scientific method. It's as simple as that. What we can do is we can ask the question. The data science is showing us when it observes reality. What does that point towards? Right? And I would argue it can only point towards the positive, not the negative. This is the thing, because if there was no evidence, it doesn't prove there's no God. But if there is empirical data which shows correlation, which shows patterns, which shows some sort of, if you like, design, then it could point towards it, right, for the positive, but not for the negative. So that's my answer.
The next question is, what if atheists claim that we are just like animals? That is, we have a natural purpose to satisfy our instincts and organic needs. So like animals will collectively do not do anything wrong and go with the flow of nature?
That's a good question, but I don't think, to be fair, I don't think most atheists would argue that. I don't think most atheists would say that, you know, there's no God, let's go, let's do what we want. Fulfill our desires, fulfill our instincts, we're just more developed animals. Right? although that may be the implications if you maintain atheism or naturalism, but that doesn't necessarily mean atheism. Most atheists I know don't subscribe to that in any way, shape, or form. Right? So, but the problem is that you can argue that as an atheist. You're completely warranted in doing that. That's what the worldview notion points towards and dictates, moves towards, is that you are a developed animal, which is slightly more developed than other animals. You have desires and instincts like other animals have desires and instincts. They fulfill the desires and instincts. Why don't you fulfill your desires and instincts? You see, that's the natural progression, which is problematic. But again, that's what the worldview entails. I'm not saying that's what atheists do, because I know many atheists, and I'm sure most of you guys know atheists. They're civilized and they're much more good human beings than many of us as Muslims. But that's the reality, right? In many cases. So I don't think the question itself is there.
Next question is, if everything can be misinterpreted, including consequentialism and religion, what makes one better than the other?
I don't know.
If everything can be misinterpreted, including consequentialism and religion, what makes one better than the other?
Okay, first I'm not misinterpreting consequentialism. I want to make this clear. I'm not misinterpreting consequentialism. What I'm doing is I'm pointing out the flaws of this way of thinking. Right? That's all I'm doing. I'm not misconstruing it or making it seem like something else. Right? I'm just pointing out the flaws. These are flaws that atheist philosophers themselves have noticed and pointed out throughout history. Secondly, what was the second part of the question? So my brain is a bit...
If everything can be misinterpreted,
Okay, as far as religion or Islam is
what
concerned,
makes one better?
well, as far as Islam is concerned, yes, religious texts can be misinterpreted. We see many people doing this throughout the world, right? We see this happening all the time. But as far as Islamic texts are concerned, there is a scope of interpretation when it comes to every single word and every single sentence, ayah, verse, whatever it may be. So there's a limited scope, right? And when studied by, and for this, if you turn to whoever's asked the question, if you go and speak to a student of knowledge even, or a sheikh, or someone of that caliber, he can go over this in much more greater detail with you, because there is a scope of interpretation, and there's a way of interpreting the verses. It's not just free for all, pick up the Quran and do what you like, make up your own conclusions and your own theories and ideas. So hopefully that clarifies that point.
This is the final question, inshallah. Does science lead to atheism?
Does science lead to atheism? I believe science does not lead to atheism. Because I believe that, as mentioned before, the foundations of science itself, a rational mind and intelligible universe, can't be accounted for naturalism and atheism, number one. Secondly, as mentioned before, science is a method which uses physical observations. It can't tell you anything about what's beyond the physical, right? And I would also argue, because we see laws, because we see patterns, because we see order in the universe, we see all of these things. It's amazing, isn't it, that we can write out mathematical equations and then superimpose them onto the universe, and it makes sense, and they add up. We live in a mathematical universe. Mathematics is precise, or as precise as we're going to get, right? This is something amazing. We have the laws of physics. We have other laws, the laws of logic, which govern this universe. Now, ask yourselves the question, what makes more sense? Believing that blind, random, non-physical, non-rational processes, dead processes, have resulted in a universe which is governed by mathematics, which is governed by distinctive laws, which is ordered, or a creator? It's a very simple question. We don't need to get technical. Apply the same basic reasoning that we apply throughout our daily lives. And I think the latter makes sense. So for that,
I don't know, somebody just sent another question, so I don't know if we can take it or just do it. Okay. So this is the last question that I'm reading. If you have any other question that you've not texted earlier, I'm afraid we cannot answer it.
You give my email address, and you can email me, inshallah.
Yeah, so I'll give you his email address, inshallah, and we can even give you his email.
Okay, so if you guys want to write it down, I.Hussein, Hussein, @iera.org. So it's I.Hussein with an E, @iera.org. Inshallah, if you guys email me there, yeah, so you can put it up there, and you can also catch me on Facebook. If you message me there, I'll probably see it more often than not. Just type in my name on Facebook. It'll come on my page, come up, inshallah. If there's any other questions you haven't been able to cover, you guys can ask me there, inshallah.
It says, would you make a link between the lack of meaning or purpose for a majority of people in the secular West and the rise of mental ill health, specifically depression?
I did, I think, to a degree, and I would as well, because this is my personal belief, and you guys can observe what's going on yourself. But I truly believe that it's a lack of purpose. Although we may not know it, although we may not know that we're ascribing purpose ourselves, subconsciously I think we're aware that we're giving ourselves purpose, and this purpose isn't fulfilling us. And which leads to depression. It did for me as well. Personally, I went through a phase in my life for about 5 or 6, maybe 7 years, where I went through a period of depression, anxiety, and neurosis, and the likes. And it was this, because I was trying different things, which weren't resulting in what I was looking for inside. Right? There's this emptiness, this void inside. And alhamdulillah, I found it through Islam. Allah showed me He guided me as Allah guides. And this is why I say to non-Muslims as well, just approach the Quran, approach Islam with an open heart. And sincerely ask God. If you're sincerely inquiring, sincerely ask God, if you exist, guide you. That's it. If you're sincere, Allah will guide you. Right? So just sincerely approach Islam. And I do believe, to finish off answering the question, that not knowing our purpose or why we were created does, in many cases, result in mental illnesses, depression, consumption of clothes, especially when we have things to try to fill that void. Right? Because there's many people in the world that don't have these things, right? So they're always guessing. Maybe if I took this alcohol, it would help me, right? But the people that do have these things and they implement these things in their lives and they use these things, that's when you see, oh, okay, it didn't work. What's next? And each time you try a new thing, your hope gets lower and lower and lower and lower, right? Because eventually it's only a finite number of things you can try before you run out. And it's when you run out, almost run out, that you end up in this crisis that, what do I do? Now what do I do? And that's the problem, I believe. So hopefully that's been beneficial, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for you guys staying so late, taking the time to be here. May Allah bless you all. May God, Allah guide those of us who are not Muslim yet. I appreciate all of you guys being here. Thank you, Richard, for coming out today as well.